We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. This is Operation Truth. With me today, as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes. I want to talk to Tom about classified information because this is a gentleman who has actually classified information, who has intimate knowledge as to how a SCIF functions. And I know there's been some confusion about Donald Trump taking classified information as a president or former president, a vice president taking classified information, which under no circumstances is he permitted to do. Although I think we should make you aware that if the vice president were to classify a document, he would have the authority to declassify a document. But on a bigger discussion, I'm trying to understand why Joe Biden wasn't pursued legally for stealing classified information from a SCIF as a United States senator. So, Tom, I know you have an enormous amount of background in this area. Can you begin to talk to this issue for us?
Well, first of all, if Joe Biden classified the information when he was a senator, when he was a vice president, he could declassify it. And, as the originator can normally declassify. And then there's a whole system. If the originator dies or is out of office, then a subordinate that took over could assume the authority to do that. But normally, from my experience, a senator or a congressman or a vice president even would not be out conducting investigations where they would write a report about it and then classify their own report. Normally, they're looking at information being given to them from other sources, from the investigators, from the FBI or DEA or DHS or the military, whoever it might be that gives him information that has already classified it, becomes classified information that he's reviewing. He's not allowed to take it out of the SCIF, which is Secure Compartmented Information Facility. It's like a vault. So you go into the vault, and whoever's running that, whichever agency is responsible for the information, can hand you documents to review, and you can read them. Can't copy them, can't take them, can't photograph them. And the way a SCIF is designed, there's SCIFs at the Capitol, there are SCIFs in the office buildings, there's SCIFs in the agencies that handle classified material. There's SCIFs in defense contractors that handle classified information. They have their own SCIFs. And there's all these rules that govern how the SCIF will be operated, maintained, and administered. So a senator or a vice president can't walk in and say, oh, I like this, I'm going to take it with me. They cannot. Normally also, a SCIF, depending on the size, it can be as small as like a vault that only holds 6 or 8 people. Or I've been in SCIFs where we've had over 100 people in it from different agencies or areas of our agency in that SCIF. But in order to go into the SCIF, no matter how big it is, you check your telephone, any electronic device that you have, you check it or put it into a secure box outside the SCIF. Then you take the key with you. You cannot take a camera, recording device, cell phone, you name it. You can't take any of that, any material or any equipment that could record or take pictures of, or even just make recordings of the conversations. So if you have an iPhone, for example, you could take pictures, you could make recordings, you could do a variety of things. Therefore, it cannot be taken into a SCIF. So the idea that Joe Biden would now have thousands of pages of documents going back to when he was a senator, and then some going back to when he was vice president, and he has them in boxes at his offices at the University of Pennsylvania or in Washington, D.C., or in his garage next to the Corvette. All of that, he shouldn't have those documents. He didn't have the authority to take them out. He doesn't have the authority to declassify any of that material, especially because he didn't classify thousands of pages of material on his own. He wasn't an investigator. He wasn't a supervisor in an investigative agency. So he's a consumer of classified material, but that doesn't mean he can keep it or take it in any way, shape, or form.
Tom, is there any circumstance in which a United States senator could remove a classified document from a SCIF?
No.
And so my next question
Yeah, they could
is,
remove it. They could try to sneak it out, hide it in their jacket pocket or something.
we're
But if
talking
they do
about,
that, they're committing a felony.
that's my point, Tom. I'm referring to legally remove. So my next question is, why hasn't Joe Biden been charged with a felony? In other words, I'm listening to people be a little confused about the vice president. I've heard some people on air say, like, oh, the vice president can declassify, the vice president can take. No, 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 he can't. But independent of that, a United States senator certainly may not take classified information out of a SCIF under any circumstances. And as Tom just pointed it out, it's a felony. Now we're up Donald Trump's dress every 15 seconds, half the time making things up to see what would stick when we threw it against the wall. You've got Joe Biden cold. Am I right, Tom? We got him cold, coming and going as a U.S. senator. Yeah. Not talking about the vice president, a U.S. senator. And what are we doing about it? And you wonder why we have such divide in this country today. This two-tier system of justice is going to come back and bite us in the not too distant future. But tell me, Tom, how does this work?
Okay, another, an example of the president having the authority. Now, one of the interesting things about classified documents or folders or files is that if you were the originator and you want to declassify it, then, there's a stamp that goes on the document to classify it that shows who's classifying it, what authority, the originating agency, the type of file it is, the type of secret, top secret, law enforcement sensitive. That's all done by the originator. If you're going to declassify your own document that comes back to you, let's say, to review, then that's another stamp that goes on the document on the top and bottom page of it, on the front of the folder that it's contained in, that says declassified. And if I'm declassifying, it would have the date, it would have my initials on there as the declassifying authority, and it would be declassified. The items, there's no mechanism like that for the president. So in other words, if he's reviewing a document or a file folder at the White House, let's say, and he wants to take it with him and declassify it, just by taking it, it becomes declassified. But there's no marking on it that it's declassified. He doesn't write on there, I've declassified it on such and such date because I'm the president and I can do it. It just goes with him. So all of these folders that the FBI found, in Mar-a-Lago, they were declassified by virtue of the fact that Trump took them and had the movers move them from the White House to Mar-a-Lago. So that's the indication that they're declassified. So now when the FBI goes in and they take pictures and show it to the media, look, none of these files say declassified. They wouldn't. They don't. That's how the system is. Now, should they design it where if the president declassifies something in his office, that, one of his secretaries comes in with the stamps it, and then he initials that he declassified it? Yeah, that'd be great. But they don't have that system. So you have to guess. The fact, and here in this case, the expression, possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, with regard to presidential documents in possession of the president, that is the 10/10 of the law that it's been declassified by the president.
Now, Tom, you have a theory about what the FBI was looking for at the behest of DOJ.
Yeah, my theory was that they wanted to remove file folders that were absolutely incriminating against the FBI. And one of the most incriminating, later cited in the Durham investigation and others, was the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, commonly called Russia or Russiagate. And the reason that Trump wanted that document or the folder is that it's actually the files of the FBI. It's going to have the names of the agents and what they did and who's guilty of the framing of the president in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And they would desperately want that back. It's too incriminating against the agency. It's too incriminating against individual agents and supervisors at the FBI that are listed in that document. Now, what we don't know and they don't know is, did Trump make photocopies of that document and hide them somewhere, before they came, we don't know. But probably not. He's probably, they just took it and he figured, well, someday later I'll write a book or I'll make use of it or anything. In the meantime, I'm busy. And so I think that they just gambled that Trump did not have an extra copy. And now that now that the FBI is in possession of the Crossfire Hurricane folder, I would think Trump will never see it again.
Tom, and as long as we're on the Trump discussion and what transpired at Mar-a-Lago, we've watched this prosecution in New York, which is predicated on him misrepresenting his financial viability, for lack of better explanation. We have no complaints, no victims, no fraud, nothing that anybody was a victim of criminally. We've got a pursuit through Letitia James and the district attorney in New York with this man. I'm struggling to understand what the end game is here in regards to the pursuit of Trump. I know he's got 4 indictments, 91 charges. I mean, if they think that Donald Trump's the only guy that ever, and I'm not saying he did this, number one, misrepresented or overpraised his value, show me somebody. I guarantee you somebody's done it along the way. But where are they going with all of this? And let me say one of the things, everyone listening. Tom and I are not telling you who to vote for, period. We're not telling you we support Donald Trump, because believe me, he's offended me in ways as well. He's done some good things in this administration of his that were overshadowed by his lack of discretion and demeanor and decorum. That's just simple fact. And at some point, he's got to take responsibility for it. He probably could have gone down and had a phenomenal administration. He just stopped insulting everybody on the planet, including the Pope. But Tom, to go back to this discussion about this case in New York, didn't Deutsche Bank just come out with something recently?
Right. The case is a fraud case, saying that he applied for a loan and misrepresented the value of the properties that he used for collateral to get the loan. So people have said that this judge decided on his own the value of Mar-a-Lago was $18 million. And you've had expert after expert come back and say the value of that property is probably close to $1 billion. Now, in the loan contracts, when you're obtaining the loan, in the contract, it says, we, the applicant of the loan, will supply you with the data we have for the value of the various properties we're using as collateral. However, you need to also do your own due diligence. You have your appraisers come in and look at it and see if there's a discrepancy between what we say a property is worth and what your appraisers say. And in the case here, the judge decided on the value of the properties like Mar-a-Lago, but Deutsche Bank, one of their executives, just testified the week before last, saying that we've looked at all of the documentation here. It's absolutely correct. And when we look at the values, we assume that the value might be overstated by the applicant for the loan. But in this case, we thought all of the documentation was in line and appropriate and adequate, and therefore everybody benefited. The Trump organization got the loan, used it properly, paid it back properly, all of that. Meantime, along the way, in the very beginning of this case, the judge decides that Trump's lying. We already know that he overvalued the properties. And like I said, Trump says, the value of Mar-a-Lago, he says, oh, it's only 18 million. He's lying. And then he takes it a bridge too far by saying, I'm ordering the Trump organization to be basically dissolved, divided up, and the officers of it, the Trump sons and Ivanka, they're all going to be held liable for all of this. And he decided it on his own. Now, the appellate court in New York looked at that and said, no, you're not dividing up you haven't even finished the case. You just can't on your own decide to divide up a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Now, secondly, this judge at the very beginning of the trial pronounced that Trump's guilty. He committed this terrible fraud. They didn't even have the trial yet. So you have Trump's attorneys trying to point that out in court and being told by the judge to basically shut up and sit down. And you've heard Alina Habba talk about that on a number of media interviews of the inappropriate behavior of that judge in court during the prosecution or during the time of the trial.
Tom, let me ask you, I mean, are we starting to embark on a pattern of behavior with judges overstepping their boundaries? New York, Colorado, we're having California threaten to do it. What is it that they don't understand, that they have a responsibility to this country to conduct our affairs in an unbiased manner, which seems to be the word of the day. Everybody seems to be so biased, and courtesy of the media, pitting us against each other with their bias. But what is this pattern that these judges just think they have this arbitrary and capricious power that they could just decide your guilt without due process, which is what we're starting to experience on a more regular basis? Are you not seeing what I'm seeing?
Yeah, the answer to that question, Lou, is yes, they do think they have that power. Now, a federal judge can be removed by impeachment. Same as a president, same as a senator, same as, anybody else at that level in the government can be impeached. Now, if they're stealing money or selling drugs or doing that, we've had federal judges in the past get impeached for being engaged in criminal activity of that order. But they look at it and they go, well, who's going to impeach them? Democratic judge doing something against Trump, they have immunity in New York. Nobody's going to bother them. So they can be as one-sided as they want, as biased as they want, make whatever decision they want without repercussion. And that's the problem right now, is you don't have any system that's viable to take them out. Now, if they could prove that this judge took, $100,000 from the DNC to rule against Trump, that'd be a different thing. That'd be a different level of corruption or bribery. But just because he has the idea in his head that Trump committed a crime, he's guilty, he should be found guilty, and his company should be destroyed. What's happened? Who's even threatened to do anything to him about that? And you don't hear it out of the appellate court in New York, other than they didn't let him break up the Trump organization. So that was one favorable decision by the appellate court. But I think at some point, this judge and judges like him are looking at it that we're going to rule against Trump and he'll take it to the Supreme Court. And yeah, he might ultimately win in the Supreme Court, but at least we did our job to try to take him out on our own.
Tom, there's another question here that is disturbing. If they were in some way, shape, or form able to convict him of a crime and then decided to incarcerate him, what do they do if he says, guess what, I'm not letting you incarcerate me? What do we do in this country if suddenly all the people that are witnessing this two-tier system of justice, whether it's Hunter Biden, his father, what's being directed towards Donald Trump, or any other number of Americans, i.e. January 6th, they go, guess what? You're not arresting me. This system is a farce.
No, what Trump has shown up till now is that every charge placed against him, the infamous mugshot picture that he's had went viral. Every time that's happened, his poll numbers have skyrocketed, and they'll continue to. So if they make a ruling that, and in this case, it's a civil case in New York, so he's not going to jail in that case. The rulings would be to disband the company and fine him hundreds of millions of dollars or even $1 billion. That's the outcome that's the most negative against Trump in that case. So far, there's been no indication that Trump would not go to jail. I mean, he came in for the mugshot, that's gone viral. It's on everybody's coffee cup now and T-shirt. So there's no indication, and Trump has never given an indication that he wouldn't comply. If they ordered him, and as a matter of fact, there was some speculation that when they put the gag order on Trump, the appellate court, they toned it down a little bit because they thought Trump and some of his attorneys were recommending violate that gag order on purpose. First of all, it's unconstitutional, will win on appeal. And the idea that if a judge, because he violated the gag order, put him in jail, that's it. The public would go crazy on behalf of Trump having this go against him. So right now, there's no indication that Trump's going to violate any court order that comes up, whether it's report to jail or whatever it's going to. He's used the court process all along, and I think he'll continue to do that.
Tom, I want to bump into this border discussion because we spoke about it last episode, And it's somewhat troubling because what we're now learning is that in order for us to get funded to secure our border, which our FBI director outlined as a threat to our national security, we have to give another $60 billion to the Ukraine, which begs the question, why? And is there a cap? And I think what's really interesting, and I'd like Tommy to do this for me, but go into the history of the Ukraine and the corruption associated with it.
Well, you have the leaders of the Ukraine enriching themselves for a long time, for decades. And the country's had the reputation of being the most corrupt, or at least close to the most corrupt country in Europe. And so now you have the Ukrainians giving millions of dollars to the Bidens through the salary of Hunter Biden, putting him on the board of Burisma Energy Company, other ways, other deals that they're doing. You've had FBI informants exposed by Grassley providing information where there's phone conversations where most of them are with Hunter Biden, but 2 are with Joe Biden regarding the payment of bribes to the Biden family on behalf of Ukraine. So that's one thing, is that you have all this money coming from the administration to go to Ukraine. Now, early in this, in the administration, they agreed to basically fund everything in the Ukraine, pay for their government, pay their salaries, pay their pensions, pay their health care. All of that's been ongoing now for a couple of years, and it's been widely reported that it's ongoing for a couple of years. So basically, Zelensky tells Joe Biden, I want X billion dollars. And basically the hidden threat is, or we'll expose you. We've got telephone recordings of our conversations with you. So you're not going to be able to say, I didn't know about my son's business. Oh, I had nothing to do with it. We're going to have conversations that incriminate you personally, directly in a bribery scheme with our country. So suddenly everything Ukraine asks for, they get. And now you have another example of that. The Zelensky wants another $60 billion, and Biden is jumping through hoops to try to help him get it. Now, finally, Congress is saying, well, we want to bargain, and we'll give you the 60 if you give us some increase in security at the southern border. Because I think it's dawning on members of Congress, especially in the House, they have to get reelected every 2 years. So they're going to be up for reelection in November 2024. A third of the Senate will be up for reelection on the same election day next year. So the idea is, and you've had FBI director testify a couple months ago, even before the attack by Hamas on Israel, that the southern border is a threat to national security. Now you have all of these elements saying that the United States government is aware of the threat posed by the open border. And now members of Congress are looking at this like, it's almost an expectation that there will be some terrorist act in the United States in the next 12 months. And when that happens, they don't want it coming out on election day. They didn't do it. They knew this was a possibility or probability that it was going to happen, and they did nothing to secure the border in the future. Now, you could say, okay, we've already had 10 million people cross the border, thousands every day, and all of that. Now, what I think they're fearful of is that just like right at the time of the Biden administration coming into power, you had all of these people amassing at the Mexico-U.S. border because they thought Biden's going to take office and they're going to open the gates. We can come on in. I think now what they're looking at is Biden's not going to get reelected and they're going to close the gates. Whoever comes in, whether it's Trump or some other candidate, is going to get elected, and they're going to close the border. They're going to increase the security at the southern border. So you better get in now while you can. So I think that the 10 or 15 or 20,000 a day that are coming in now, I think that's going to get larger and larger as the months go on next year in 2024.
Tom, and we have both agreed in past conversations that there's a disinterest by the American public overall. We're distracted taking care of our kids and paying bills. But, anyone listening to this needs to understand something. we have some topics, some issues in this country that will translate to being our defining moment. The borders is one of them. This issue in our major cities, where basically we're running every corporate entity out of these cities. Recently we just had 2 pro athletic teams leave Washington, D.C., and another business establishment. I believe in San Francisco, there have been 21 business establishments that have left San Francisco, contradictory to what Gavin Newsom is telling you, that corporate entities come to California to flourish. I don't know where he's getting his information from, but take a look at your own state. New York is experiencing it. They have what I understand to be a 40% vacancy rate in commercial real estate. You can go up and down Madison Avenue, Lexington Avenue, 3rd, 1st, and 2nd Avenues, and you see vacant space. This country is in a crisis, and it's incumbent upon the people who live here, who are legally here, who have the right to vote, to get out and vote. And Tom and I are not telling you who to vote for. We think you're all pretty grown up and you should be able to see the condition of the country in the past 3 years. And we don't find comfort in being critical of our country. That's not why I believe I was put on the planet. When Joe Biden was elected, he had my unconditional support. He was our elected president. Until we started to unravel this country, which is what we've done in every capacity. I don't want to go back into foreign policy, but momentarily explain to people what happened when we abandoned Afghanistan. We left all the women and all these young girls we promised they would have futures and lives and educations and a voice. We put them right back in the hands of the Taliban and Al Qaeda. We left $85 billion of weaponry, some of which is floating around different parts of the world. You just have to look at the news sometimes. You'll see our M4s in the hands of our adversaries. Your energy sector is shot. This whole lie about transitioning to electricity, they don't want to tell you the little nuances attached to what happens when you get an electric battery. Better yet, when you have to dispose of it. Better yet, when you have to extinguish a fire, which they're almost unextinguishable. That's how bad they are. They had over 200 last year in New York City, my home. Actually, it isn't my home any longer, but it was my home. They ran me out as a result of this lunacy. We have a lot of problems here, Tom. I think you'll agree with me. And I think this next November is going to be a defining moment for this country. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
No, it is going to be a defining moment, but the question is going to be that we've had example after example in the last couple of elections that even in cities where the services, even in neighborhoods where the services are not good and the people are not benefiting from that, and they scream that they want better education or school choice or business opportunities in their communities, and doesn't happen. Election after election, the Democratic Party doesn't fulfill the promises, nothing improves. And yet, what happens? The voters go back to the polls, vote the same people back in over and over and over. So is that going to change in 2024? We'll see, but we don't know yet.
I tell you, Tom, every time we bump into an election cycle, the Democrats cleverly reintroduce this discussion about pro-choice, about, women's rights. And, the Republicans fall right into this hole. At some point in time, their caps have to go on and understand they need to empower our women to navigate a problem that really focuses on them. For openers, my approach to this is very simplistic. I don't think you should use it as a form of birth control, although there are really circumstances that could arise that might need you to do so, contrary to public opinion. And I'd like to know when life begins. And, as we're talking every day on these podcasts, we've destroyed the credibility of the media, the government, our judicial system, our educational system, science and medicine. So who's supposed to really give us this unattached accounting for when life begins so we can start to more intelligently approach this pro-choice discussion? But I'm fearful that they're going to get into this religious right routine again, which puts people off, to be honest. And this discussion about pro-choice, which just resonates with women. In my opinion, I don't know if this is even possible. They should have made it an amendment. But you're supposed to support our women unconditionally, not make everything we bump into some type of political tug of war, which, by the way, seems to be a new pattern we're into. Everything we bump into becomes politicized and weaponized. No exemptions for the COVID virus. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Guys, we're going to have to call it for today. This has been Operation Truth. My name's Lou Palumbo. This is Tom Fuentes. We encourage you to become part of this conversation. You can reach us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I promise you, we're going to continue to provide you some very credible, truthful, unbiased information. Tom and I are not speaking to you as Republicans or Democrats or independents even. We're speaking to you as men that care about this country and, more importantly, about our young people and the future of this country. We are shortchanging the young people here big time. And if you think they have resentment for us now, wait till they get a little older and they understand what all these rocket science, all these smart people. I keep thinking about this expression that came out of the Kennedy administration: the best and the brightest. Look what the smart people have done to your country. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you again next week.